is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Red Rising Book 3, Morning Star, chapters 63 through Epilogue. These chapters are titled Silence, Hail, The Veil, and Epilogue, as I previously mentioned. These are the chapters where we figure out how we're going to run things from now on. And it turns out that Darrow has a secret love child. Oh boy. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashely for commissioning this episode. Ashely, if you are out there, appreciate you. So just for those who are interested, the next book has been started on commissions. The first 4 sections are already commissioned through chapter 16, which for all I know is the final chapter of the book. I don't know. I haven't looked at any of that. But it's Iron Gold. And that way you guys can be rest assured that I will be starting that. The first 2 are in July, and then we've got August. So I had thought that there wouldn't be room to book anything until September. I am so delighted, you guys, that I was misreading my calendar. I don't even know how I made that kind of mistake, but I'm really, really excited that I get to start the next one so soon, because I had thought it was going to be this long break. And the fact that it's called Iron Gold also, I really like that. All right, before I get ahead of myself talking about a book I have not yet read, let's talk about the book that I did read. So, 63 starts off with, as we ended the previous one, the jackal laughing. Now, first of all, there's a couple things I want to say. Number 1, the laughing jackal would be a sick, bar name. I don't know, it just resonates with me. So if anybody wants to throw me $50,000 for the rights to that name, which I have definitely trademarked right now in this extremely copyrighted material, please let me know. Secondly, I had thought he was holding the nukes above Octavia's head. I didn't realize that it wasn't a sort of abstract threat. It didn't occur to me that he would have planted them somewhere the way that he has. So this explains why he was able to get away with talking to her and to Aja like this. And she doesn't spill it and let anybody know that this is she clearly lets Aja know. Aja's aware. But I can't imagine the position that she was in, and it made me almost feel a little bit of sympathy for her for a second. Just the way that he really managed to sort of one-up her, and honestly, the way that she has been one-upped so frequently of late, it's just kind of a bad record that she's got at this point. I really did. I had a little bit of sympathy and was just sort of oh, that's a really tough, what's the word I want? The luck of the draw was not with her. That's a tough hand, I think. I don't really, okay? I just want everybody to be aware. I'm not saying, oh my God, I really sympathize with this autocratic, I am just saying the position that it turns out, has been in that we weren't aware of. It's the kind of situation that would make me sick to my stomach daily. And I don't know how she coped with that and how long he has been holding this over her head. So I'm going to just read the exact way that he says this. I remember the feeling of being under the ground, Darrow, the cold stone under my hands, my Pluto house members around me, hunched in the darkness, the steam on their breaths, looking to me. I remember how afraid I was of failing, of how long I had prepared, how little my father thought of me. All my life weighed in those moments, all of it slipping away. We'd run from our castle, fleeing Vulcan. They came so fast. They were going to enslave us. The last of our house members were still running through the tunnel by the time I rigged the mines to blow, but so were Vulcan. I could hear my father's voice, hear him telling me how he was not surprised I failed so quickly. It was a week before we killed a girl and ate her legs to survive. She begged us not to, begged us to choose someone else. But I learned then, in that moment, if no one sacrifices, then no one survives. And all of a sudden, Mustang realizes that they're here. They had expected the nukes to be on Luna, or on Mars, but they're actually on Luna. And Severo also is like figuring this out immediately. And Jackal was like, I wouldn't nuke Mars. That's where I was born. That's the place to be. And that's what I am inheriting. And it makes so much sense that he would be like very fixated on his birthright and like the history of his house with the planet, because all he has ever been trying to do is convince his father mainly, but really like himself, that he deserves to inherit, that he is like as much of a potential legend as his father, and that he is capable, you know. It's just really, it's surprising that none of us really had considered that. So he says that the radiation signatures for where the bombs are have been masked, and even if we could, oh no, this is Mustang speaking. Even if we could, we couldn't deactivate them. And the Jackal says, if you make the call to the comm fleet, I detonate a bomb every minute. And he taps a comm in his ear, and it's like, yeah, this has all happened like literally weeks ago. And I am ready to do a whole other nuclear winter. I told Octavia what I had done when it was all over, and I told her my terms. She would carry on as sovereign until the rising was put down, which has taken a surprising twist, obviously. And afterward, on the day of victory, she would convene the Senate, abdicate the morning throne, and name me her successor. In return, I would not destroy Luna. So I do kind of enjoy that Luna, correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but Luna is our moon, Earth's moon. And so the fact that this is happening in a place that's like, at least we have some sort of scope of what that is, and we have some sort of, it's not just the fact that it's such an enormous number of people for me, but it made me also think about how potentially fragile the structure of Luna itself would be. Is it possible to like break it apart? Is it possible to essentially eliminate the moon altogether? And what effect does it have on Earth? A lot of questions about that. So this is the moment, and as much as I don't agree with him on what it is that he interprets here, I understand his reaction. So Mustang is talking to him, and she says, these are people. You have the power to give 3 billion people their lives, Adrius. That is power beyond anything anyone should ever want. You have the chance to be better than father, better than Octavia. You condescending little bitch, he says, with a small laugh of disbelief. You really think you can still manipulate me? This one is on you. Lilith, detonate the bomb on the southern Maris. I'm not even going to try it. But we see the little blip, and it's how many people? Like 5 million? She says, yeah, here it is. There were 5 million people in that district. Severo is about to rush him, and Cassius is like, nah, dude, you have got to, like, take a minute here, collect yourself. And he even turns to Darrow and says, what do we do? Well, it turns out he wants Darrow to kill himself in front of his sister, and then he can be a martyr, and he'll have bought these people their lives with his sacrifice. And he, in the midst of all of this, is like intermittently getting in touch with Lilith and sending her another order. And Severo realizes also everybody out there is going to think that this is us, aren't they? And the jackal is like, yup, it looks like part of an invasion. The people out there burning are going to be your legacy, which really, that is so devastating. And this is one of those moments that I realize what a slave to pride I am, because I know that, like, after everything that, if I were Darrow, I had done, knowing that a lot of people out there in history were going to go forward and think it was me that had done something this hideous and horrific, that would really fuck with me. The idea of just like, oh yeah, that's the dude that we all lauded and worshipped as a hero and practically unkillable. No, that dude actually, like, was a genocidal maniac. I would be... So... This is when Darrow is thinking back about how he had thought all of this was going to lead to something new. But my death would leave the jackal here in this world. It would leave him with the power over those I love, over all I've fought for. I always thought I would die before the end. I trudged on, knowing I was doomed. But my friends have breathed love into me, breathed my faith back into my bones. They've made me want to live. They've made me want to build. And when he says, Darrow, what is your answer? Darrow says, no. I punch him in the throat. Guys, I just think maybe Adrius shouldn't have been standing close enough to Darrow that he could do this. I'm not trying to criticize here, Adrius. I'm definitely trying to criticize, but, but it just really feels like you've set yourself up when you're standing within arm's length of this dude that you have known is capable of bonkers shit. Adrius, why are you standing so close? So anyway, because he has got him in the throat, Adrius can't continue with issuing commands to blow up the, other bombs. And Darrow shoves his hand into Adrius' mouth. The last time I pinned him down, I took the wrong weapon. What are hands to a creature like him? All his evil, all his lies are spun with the tongue. So I grab it with my helldiver hand, pinning it between forefinger and thumb like the fleshy little baby pit viper it is. This is always how the story would end, Adrius, I say down to him, not with your screams, not with your rage, but with your silence. And with a great pull, I rip out the tongue of the jackal. Y'all, I have so many feelings about this. First of all, why were you standing so close, obviously? But also, that is so horrifying. Like, the tongue removal that I have seen in fiction, I don't feel like I've ever looked into tongue removal in real life, has been hot pincers, right? It's meant to sort of like cauterize it so that you don't bleed out. From what I understand, probably Adrius should die from blood loss just from this injury. It does make him eventually pass out unconscious, but I would have thought that this would kill him. But doing it so that it's like by the roots sounds so absolutely hideous that I can't, like, I'm trying to imagine something like more visceral feeling than that, because it's an organ, right? Or is it a muscle? I think a tongue is a muscle, but it's like embedded in your body, but it's also quite vulnerable. It's out in and amongst your teeth, which we've all bitten our tongue and know how fucking terrible that is. So it's like, really, what other kind of muscle could you do this to? I mean, I don't even want that question answered, to be honest. And then, like, your mouth is so sensitive and your tongue is so sensitive. This is a nightmare. This is so awful. However, Adrius is so insufferable at this point. And Darrow is so correct that this is where all of his power lays. So it's a really brilliant approach just in a practical sense. And then after everything the Jackal has done to everybody, and especially Darrow, getting to rip his tongue out, I don't think it makes them even at all. Like a year of torture in comparison to this, no. However, just like beheading him, it's not interesting, right? Like, I don't think I'm alone in this. When you have a kind of villain like him, who has been the actual villain we've been dealing with the whole time, and you reach a point as an author where you have to write how they get taken down. When you have somebody like this, they can't just die the way that you would really kill somebody. But also, I would have been very unsatisfied if we found out that he was kept alive for some ridiculous reason. So I feel like this really walks a nice line of, like, I'm doing something slightly more interesting, and it would be incredibly painful, so it's giving you a feeling of, like, he's getting what he deserves, but also it doesn't feel gratuitous, and it's going to be a sort of, like, appetizer of satisfaction before we get to the actual part where he is hanged. And I was so relieved because, truthfully, you guys, I really thought he was going to be kept alive. I really did. And I was so aware that there's another book series after this. And I don't know if it's even the same characters or not. I was having a sort of, like, maybe it's a prequel series, or maybe it's like Darrow's son, you know, that we're following at that point. It could be a Vorkosigan sort of style thing. But also it's a possibility that, like, we have to deal with the fucking Jackal again. And with the world that these people occupy, not executing him would have felt like nonsense. Of course we have to kill him. Like, are you serious? So I was just very, very relieved. I needed that. Okay. Finally, they get in touch with Victra, and Darrow tells her, you need to destroy the Lion of Mars. They're the ones detonating the bombs. And she's like, that thing is at the center of their formation. Getting the fleet to it is going to take hours. And Mustang says, can we jam their signal? What about EMPs? They have shielding. Use the EMPs on the bombs to short-circuit their radio transmitters. Fire an iron rain and drop EMPs on the city till they're out. And plunge 3 billion people into the Middle Ages? Cassius asks. We'll be slaughtered, Victra says. We can't drop a rain. We'll lose our army and gold will just keep the moon. Another bomb detonates, this one nearer the southern pole, and then a fourth at the equator. We know the consequences to each one. Lilith doesn't know exactly what's happened to Adrius, Cassius says quickly. How loyal is she? Will she detonate all of them? Not when he's still whimpering, I say. At least that's my hope. And I was really, guys, sort of worried that maybe there was something, because like his comm is built into his head so that they don't know it's there. If that's my understanding, is that like the way that the comm is, the way that he wears it in is explicitly so that he can have contact that nobody else can see. But I don't know, maybe it's like just how they do things. And because he said to all of them, like, she's my insurance, right in front of them. So maybe he didn't care if they knew he was in contact, and it was just sort of taken for granted. Like, yeah, you're going to want to be in contact with your people. It's not a big deal. But I had kind of thought that, like, maybe he would have some sort of link with his heartbeat, so that if they do kill him, that it would, send a signal that she's to detonate all of them, because that's the way that, he knows that he can get the last laugh even after he's dead. But it seems like here she's just detonating because she hasn't gotten any further orders, and she's assuming the worst. Because he was just speaking to her like pretty consistently. He's gone quiet, and she can hear that he is still alive. And so she is trying to be like, let him go or else. And she starts it up again so that she can show them how far she's willing to take it. That's my assumption anyway, but I'm interested if you guys have a different interpretation of what she's thinking there. Like I said in the last one, I just don't really feel like I know Lilith at all. So being able to tell exactly what motivates her to do anything, I really can't say with any certainty on any front, because all I have felt is that she's had this sort of like adoration of him and a deep, real loyalty. But that could just be complete bullshit. I could just be like putting that on her, I genuinely don't know. So anyway, this is when Lysander says, call my godfather, the Ash Lord. And at first they're like, you guys, he destroyed Rhea. Why would he? And then Lysander interrupts and is like, yeah, and it fucks with him every single day that he did that. Like, if you tell him that he has a chance to stop something else like that from happening, he will take that chance. So they call in, and I love Lysander being the one to like calm him down. So Mustang steps forward and she says, the Sovereign is dead. The nuclear blasts you see destroying your home are not red weapons. They come from your own arsenal, which was stolen by my brother. His praetor, Lilith, is overseeing the detonation of more than 400 nuclear warheads from the bridge of the Lion of Mars. They will continue until Lilith is dead. My fellow Aurea, embrace change or embrace oblivion. The choice is yours. And one of them says that she's a traitor, and then Lysander goes over and picks up the scepter that's got his grandmother's blood on it and hands it to Mustang and says, she's not a traitor, she's our conqueror. And I really did appreciate this, because like, the idea that you can call her a traitor when she is doing what y'all have been doing. She's playing by the rules you set up. Like, this is actually kind of reminding me of the Jackal and him being like, everybody told me that it was just any way that you can win, you do it, and you don't care about like the sacrifice. And then that's what I did. And now all of a sudden everybody hates me for it. It really was sort of making me go like, come on, isn't that exactly what she did? And eventually at the end, we get Mustang standing in front of all of them and being like, I remember when she had like was holding the head of a conqueror and hearing that you guys all went along with it. Well, here I am now. And I really just assumed we were going to be playing it the same way again. No, correct me if I'm wrong, but I am standing here with a head, and I feel like that really does give me the advantage here. So the chapter 64 starts off without like, we have sort of left real time, and we're getting a quickened version of what's happening. They take down the Lion of Mars. Watching Luna crackle with nuclear explosions did more to kill the bloodlust between the two navies than any peace or truce ever did. Few men truly like seeing beauty burn, but burn it does. Before the Lion is put to rest, more than 12 bombs detonate, carving new cities of fire and ash among those of steel and concrete. And, yeah, I mean, I have to assume if they had detonated all of them, because she says like 100 warheads, something like that, that it would probably have just ended up destroying the moon. Unless they added like a bunch of reinforcement to the, considering how much they have been able to terraform, maybe they can. With the news of Sovereign's death and the detonation of the bombs, the society shudders beneath our feet. Wealthy praetors are taking their personal ships and fracturing away, heading home to Venus, Mercury, or Mars. They do not stand together because they do not know where to stand. And we find out just basically that everybody wants to take the side of whoever's going to win, and they have no idea who that's going to be, and they need to just get away so that they can sort of camp out and see who it seems is going to win the day, and that way they can just come forth and have their back. Are you ready? I ask. What? She shakes her head. How could he do this? I don't know, I say, but we can fix it. How? This moon will be pandemonium, tens of millions dead, the devastation, and we can rebuild it together. The words flood her with hope, as if she's only just remembered where we are, what we've done, that we're together, alive. She blinks quickly and smiles at me, then she looks at my arm where my right hand used to be and touches my stomach where Aja stabbed me. How are you still standing? Because we're not yet done. So, then we have a moment where they ask what that smell is, and eventually Severo says a couple things about how it's not a big deal, that they're like, did you just shit yourself? And he says, like, it's an involuntary muscle reaction when you're fake executed and swallow massive amounts of hemanthus oil. Yeah, I have to assume that, like, just drinking a bunch of oil is probably gonna give you the shits. I feel like that's just, you know. So it just never fails. We always have to just take a moment and be back with Severo and something about bathroom humor or his balls or, you know, something. We got to do something with that. Okay. So he starts having a heart attack, but then he's just like, no, I'm good. I'm fine. It's no big deal. And for a moment, I was sort of like, that doesn't feel like that's okay. But I realized they're golds. And so maybe a heart attack isn't that big a deal to them. And also he can just keep himself on his feet for the next like 20 minutes that it's going to be necessary. So they go into this room and it says, let's see, the door rumbles and dilates open to reveal a hall filled with Praetorians, their weapons drawn and pointed into the mouth of the bunker. Mustang steps forward bearing two symbols of power, one in each hand. Praetorians, you serve the sovereign. The sovereign is dead. A new star rises. She continues walking toward them, refusing to break her step when she nears their line of bristling metal. I think a young gold with furious eyes might pull the trigger, but his old captain puts a hand on the man's weapon, lowering it. And they break for her. Parting and lowering their weapons, one by one, they back away to let her pass, their helmets slithering back into their armor. I've never seen a woman so glorious and powerful as she is now. She is the calm eye of the storm, and we follow in her wake, riding the dragon maw lift up in silence. More than 4 of the Praetorians have come with us. And then they get to the citadel, and there's a lot of chaos there. But as they go through into I think they're heading into the Senate, they open the door and it turns out that they were holding an election. And it's such a weird thing, you guys. I don't know if it's supposed to be like an election for who will be the new sovereign, or if there was like, I'm assuming that was what it was, and that they had just simply not wrapped up, or that they were trying to like get one another's support so that they could all join their forces together in the last moments. But I really want to know what they thought these kids were going to do. I call them kids, even though they're like meant to be in their 20s now, but I stand by that. But like these people have just killed the sovereign, and you've heard about it. Do you really think that you stand a chance with them leading this rebellion of taking the power back and away from them? Like, what are you on that you even think this is going to work? So Mustang takes the podium with the rest of us flanking her. I toss the jackal to the ground so that Senate can see what has become of him. He's unconscious and pale from blood loss. Mustang looks at me. This is a moment she never wanted, but she accepts it as her burden, just as I have accepted mine as Reaper. I see how it troubles her, how she will need me as I've needed her, but I could never stand where she stands, or hold what she holds, not without destroying everyone in this room. They would never accept it. If I am the bridge to the low colors, she's the bridge to the high. Only together can we bind these people. Only together can we bring peace. And, oh, you know what? I'm just seeing like the part where they catch them with the election. He says, of course they would never suspect that the Praetorians guarding them would support rebels, or that we could walk from the sovereign's bunker unimpeded. Okay, so they really thought that they just had time. Okay, that makes sense. So I don't like, I'm interested in, when you guys commission things, I'm always interested in hearing what exactly you had been particularly looking forward to me getting to. And like, even if we're not looking at giant twists and plot arcs and surprises, what little moments you were sort of like, I wonder what she's going to think of this. Because sometimes it's like the small stuff that winds up being the most ripe for conversation and different types of interpretation. So I am curious, with like from all of y'all's perspective, how many of you expected for Mustang to be the one that becomes the new sovereign? I am not surprised by this, but I also didn't really think Darrow was going to be sovereign either. So I don't think that it ever occurred to me explicitly that, like, yeah, likely she's the one. I can't recall if I ever mentioned anything like that, like that suspicion to you guys. I don't think so. And personally, I really, really like this. I think it's like extremely interesting to not only have it be somebody who is like that we knew from so early on in the series and who has made such a personal impression on us, but also that we're keeping it a gold, because I think a lot of folks would have expected for the transition of power to have to be a non-gold. And I have a lot of like worries about how it would be received by other people. Like anybody who isn't gold, basically finding out that they're being ruled by a gold after everything that they have fought for. Is this going to be good enough? That's the real question that I am sort of hung up on, because it feels like I don't know if I'm misinterpreting this, but the fact that we had all of these like riots and everything breaking out from a Gold shooting a Red on camera, and it basically turned into the rebels turning on each other, and they all had to be like talked down by Severo. I am really concerned that this is that same kind of thing. And I just want to make it clear, the explanation as to why I get, and I don't disagree with, it's actually very true to life. Anytime that there is a sort of revolution, it's almost never a complete replacement of the current system with a completely new system. That is a lot, you know. It's usually this sort of thing where we've got a version of something that we had already. And unfortunately, it can also be that like some of the same people who, not necessarily the ones on top, but a lot of the people in like the body of the original structure are still there when we, you know. So I think that this makes a lot of sense and feels really grounded in the reality of these sorts of situations. And I like Darrow like addressing the fact that when this all started, his full assumption was that he was simply going to be able to burn it down and then start a whole new thing that would just like rise up out of the ashes. And he's like, yeah, that's just not how things work though. And that is a sort of childish understanding of a situation that is as nuanced as this is. And later on, Mustang asks him, do you think it'll last? And his response is, it would be the first time. Which, even though that's a pretty grim response, is completely fucking true. And that's just human nature. And to a degree, you have to accept that, like, there'll always be struggle. Because people always are selfish. There's always greedy, power-hungry extremists willing to do whatever it takes. So, yeah, it's even if you establish a really wonderful peace, even if you have somebody in place who is just ushers in a golden age, eventually they're going to have to die. And then what? Like, hopefully we just have a peaceful transition to power by somebody that they were able to put in, like, tap before they died, and it would be somebody trained, and who knows, but there is always that sort of like chaos initially. And the way that things had worked here with the Sovereign, like, she is meant, when we first meet her, I was very much reading it as like, oh, here's the queen. And then Darrow at one point explicitly says, like, she was never meant to be a queen. She was never meant to be somebody who, like, you know, just had the power and held on to it. So with that understood, was Lysander meant to take over after her and simply to inherit? Because I was assuming it was. But if she's not meant to be an actual, like, monarch, then how is inheritance like that? How does that work? I don't know the way that you establish something like this other than a person eventually is going to come in and cut her head off. You know what I'm saying? So just wondering, I have to assume that this has actually been mentioned somewhere in the books, but forgive me, there's a lot to keep track of here. So, all right. So, she holds up the head and is like, bend or break, kiddos. And Darrow leads the charge with kneeling, and everybody else follows suit. It says all but 50 kneel and break the silence together. And I really want to know who those 50 are and how exactly that was handled. So then we have a little break in the chapter, and then we go into the execution of the jackal. And I got to say, I felt like this was pretty satisfying. It's like I have often said that I didn't feel Joffrey's death was terrible enough. It's like over too quickly after the way that he has made people suffer and the sort of like sadism that he has engaged with. It was not enough for me. On the other hand, I don't need it to go on and on forever, but you know what I'm saying. And the jackal having his tongue removed and so completely unable to like communicate in any way that would be meaningful to him. That's the main thing. He could probably still communicate in some way, but that isn't the way that he excelled, and it wasn't his primary weapon. So it's never going to be what it was, and he has to just sort of live with being less than he had been and know that the end was coming for him for a week before it happened. That's pretty solid. I feel like that's infused with enough like dread for him that even though he goes to the gallows head held high, even when somebody like clocks him in the head with a rock, he doesn't really react and doesn't seem like he even feels the pain of it. And that, of course, has got to be just for show. But right up until the end, he seemingly kind of keeps it together. Despite that, it almost feels to me, and I may just be saying this because I wish it were true, but it almost feels to me like all the fight has been knocked out of him. Having his tongue removed was just sort of like, well, now how am I supposed to do anything and care anymore, you know? And there's a long moment of him after the floor drops out and the noose tightens, where we are reminded that there's even less gravity on Luna, and that pulling his legs is going to be even more necessary here, and nobody is stepping up to do it. They are being given the chance to do it, but everybody is just watching him, and probably, considering what he did to this place, they are relishing it, I'm sure. And eventually Mustang comes forward and she pulls his legs, showing him that even in the end, he was loved. And that moment where he says, like, you condescending little bitch, you're still trying to manipulate me even now. It was a real moment for me because on the one hand, of course she is, you know, like she's trying to stop you from doing something. So yeah, manipulation, like what else are you supposed to do? But he is saying it as if she's got like, as if it's for her own gains. And that's the part that I think is really telling, is she is genuinely worried for the lives of other people. This isn't just, I want to win and I need you to do this thing so that I can get what I want. She is very much in the headspace of like anything to keep you from continuing down this road, because those are actual human beings. And I just don't think that the jackal really can comprehend somebody giving a shit enough about other people that they would be like willing in a moment like this to anger him. Like, he is just somebody who fundamentally does not have empathy, and I don't feel can conceive of wanting to do anything just for it being the right reason, when he himself his whole life has been out here just trying to get the approval of his father and wanting to win. Like, that's always been the thing with the jackal, is that he sees everything as a sort of competition in a way that I think he assumes everyone else also does. It's a really interesting question because, like, this is actually reminding me of, I'm covering The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is a prequel of The Hunger Games. And the main character is President Snow. And he is approaching the world around him in this very mercenary sort of way. Every man for himself, and we all know it, just accept it, that kind of vibe. And he really is like, when he gets into any given situation, he really does just assume that everybody around him is operating with the same values that he is. So he approaches any moment of somebody showing him like generosity or giving him a second chance. It always, there's a moment of him being grateful, and then it's immediately followed up with, although I'm sure you know that this is just going to make you look good, so probably this isn't for altruistic reasons. Or he's like, or probably you know that if you reach out a hand to me when so-and-so does such and such, they're my cousin and that I'll be able to help you. Like, everything that anybody does, he thinks of an ulterior motive that they could have and assumes that everybody is walking through the world looking at other people as if they are also opponents that have to be like either defeated or gotten out of the way entirely. And I think that's really the Jackal, is that he has no comprehension of somebody who sees other folks as human beings that should be cared about. And so even though what she's saying here is like, you genuinely have an opportunity to be better than them, she means it. It's like when folks like me, and probably a lot of you, when we say things like, I don't know how you become a billionaire, and you don't just go solve the Flint water crisis, build millions of people homes and give them to them. Like, I am somebody who, my first thought when I think about what I would do if I like won the lottery or inherited, I would give a lot of money away. There's a lot of people I know personally and not personally who would need it. And it's just wild to me that you would get that opportunity and then not do that. And I feel like that's exactly what Mustang is feeling here. She's just like, you have us in the palm of your hand, and you have the chance to like be anybody. And this is what you're fucking doing? Are you serious? And I just don't feel that he has any understanding of how literally she means it. So anyway, yeah, she pulls on his legs, and he didn't even deserve that, but I get it. So then we go to 65, The Veil. In the weeks following the bombing of Luna and the ascension of Mustang, the world has changed. Millions lost their lives, but for the first time, there is hope. In the aftermath of her speech to the Senate, dozens of gold ships defected, joining the forces of Orion and Victra. The Ash Lord did his best to rally his navy, but with Luna burning, his fleet fracturing, and Mustang as sovereign, it was all he could do to keep his own ships from falling into enemy hands. He retreated to Mercury with the core of his forces. In his absence, Mustang has secured the cooperation of much of the military, particularly the Grey Legions and Obsidian Slave Knights. She has used this political muscle to take the first steps to dismantling the color hierarchy and the gold grip on military power. I really, really wanted more detail than that. It just wasn't enough for me. Like, that is so incredibly vague that I'm actually a little surprised, because this author has, for the most part, really wanted to get kind of specific about a lot. So the fact that he just says, oh, we're taking the first steps, and then it's sort of like, and then the Senate has been disbanded. The Board of Quality Control has been dissolved. I mean, that's all to the good, but I also feel like that's not him giving examples of the first thing, right? Like, I just really wanted more of this. And then he says, I thought I might be able to rest after Octavia was dead, but we are not without enemies. Romulus and the Moon Lords remain on the rim. The Ash Lord aims to rally Mercury and Venus. Gold warlords have begun carving out claims, and Luna itself is a disaster, overrun by riots and shortages of food and spreading radiation. She will survive, but I doubt she will ever look the same, no matter how much Quicksilver promises to rebuild the city to even greater heights. I at once appreciate this being mentioned. I knew that it wasn't going to be like the end, if we just fit wrapped here, that it really wouldn't be true. But also, I really feel for him and the fact that he is like, I just really thought I could take a little break. And I can't. I really thought, oh man, I'm sorry for it. It sounds exhausting. Like, I do not blame you. That sucks. It would be incredibly irresponsible to just be like, hey guys, I'm going to take a couple weeks off and just sort of, But honestly, I would be so tempted. Also, Romulus and the Moon Lords still being their enemies after everything, it's hard for me to conceive of. I'm not saying this to imply that I don't believe it. I'm talking about that I don't understand the kind of personality that after everything would still blame Darrow. Like, he figures out that he was manipulated via this whole thing that they set up with Roke, with these bombs that are being kept somewhere. But then you have Luna actually being exploded, and I feel as if it sort of supported their point of who it was that he was working with, and even if it wasn't literally the case right there, that it looked bad enough that you can just sort of in the end be like, all right, you know what? I'm going to give you this one, because even though they weren't holding it over our head, they still did have those weapons, and they had them like secretly, and it was in her back pocket to like destroy a whole other planet. Granted, it's the Jackal who actually did this, but like, he was the one skimming them. It wasn't that he created them out of nothing. The Sovereign did have this massive supply. So, I don't know. Like I said, I believe it because it's just the personal aspect of Darrow completely manipulating them. But I also kind of feel like, dude, maybe you should just take the L and appreciate the fact that, like, it was ultimately to unseat somebody who likely was as terrible as they were being made out to be, even if what was being used to illustrate that was a lie. Just kind of step back and consider how bad it could have gotten, and that ultimately doing what these people wanted was probably best for everybody, including you. But he is very proud, and I know that he won't do that. So, under the supervision of Holiday, Sephi has set off to Mars to begin the slow process of freeing the rest of her people, visiting the poles with medicine instead of weapons. I remember how dark her eyes seemed when she looked at one of the Jackal's nuclear craters in person. For now, she's embraced the legacy of her brother and plans to settle on warmer land set aside for her people on Mars. Though she wishes to keep her people from the alien cities, I think she knows deep down she will not be able to control them. The Obsidians will leave their prisons. They will grow curious, spread, and assimilate. Their world will never be the same, nor will that of my people. Soon, I will return to Mars to help Dancer lead the migrations of Reds to the surface. Many will stay and continue the lives they know, but for others, there will be a chance for life under the sky. So, I was thinking about this, and it was so funny because then, he tells us this about what's going on with the Reds. But, you guys, I genuinely am surprised that we don't get a moment where we see the Reds being informed of the fact that this place has been terraformed and livable for, like, what is it? 300 years, 800 years. It was very, very long time. And I had kind of expected, and I don't think I even really realized I expected it. But yeah, I expected to see a scene of shock and horror as the Reds find out the scale of the lie. And instead, we never actually witnessed that. And there wasn't a way to have that happen except in front of Darrow. And Darrow being there for that would probably be like difficult to make plausible, I suppose. But now, when he's even talking about like he's helping them with their migration to the surface, I was thinking that he was going to say something about once they found out that the terraforming was done. I again expected like a little more here, that there was going to be a description of how they reacted to the news that they could go up to the surface. And we don't get it. And I was just like, but this is such a huge revelation, isn't it? And I started to be like, maybe it wasn't, or I don't know. I'm just like, I'm curious about how the author was like picturing that. So then we have the goodbye between him and Cassius. I always want to say Cassian because I'm reading the Court of Thorns and Roses series, and there's a character in that. But yeah, Cassius starts to give the ring back to Darrow that he took off his finger the night Lauren and Fitchner died. I close his hand back around it. That belongs to Julian, I say. He nodded softly. Thank you, brother. And there, on a Citadel landing platform in what was once the heart of Gold Power, Cassius, Albalona, and I shake hands and say farewell, almost 6 years to the day since we first met. I was delighted, you guys, to find out that my hopes about Cassius had been, valid, that he didn't just decide to turn on Severo and be vicious. You guys know how much I was hurt by the gulf that appeared between them, and how much worse Cassius took it than I even expected about Darrow. I just really was surprised at how hard he separated himself from Darrow, and it hurt more than I would have expected. So I was really relieved that the two of them are able to like be, it seems, almost back at the level of friendship they had been. And after everything, I just never really would have thought we could get here. But he worked with them at the end in such a huge way that I feel like this is the only proof that would have worked to get them to be on the same side with so much sincerity about it as they are. I'm kind of torn, guys, on whether or not I want the next series to like involve the same characters or not. A part of me really would like a different POV, but the same characters, like we could get a Cassius POV or a Mustang POV. But also, if we just went off with different characters, I wouldn't be mad about it either. I just, I can't decide. I really can't. Sometimes new characters are really hard to like adjust to at first, and then you start to be like, oh, this is actually better. But anyway, okay, so then we have him and Mustang sitting together, and it's been weeks. And he finally asks, did I pass your test? And she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, you know what I mean. Everything that I have been like going through, I have noticed you watching and evaluating me. And I just can't tell what it is that you're trying to figure out, because I thought that I had done it at one point and that wasn't even enough. So have I passed the test? And finally she gets up and she says, okay, so yes, I wanted to know if you could also build and that my people could live with you and all of this, like, definitely. But there is something else that I have to tell you. And as soon as she said that, I was like, oh, God, because, of course, I didn't even think of it, but, like, it makes a lot of sense, especially considering that, like, he was in the box for the amount of time, so, you know, I was thinking, like, oh, 9 months, that's a period of gestation, and it's very symbolic, but I didn't realize how very literal that was being used in a whole other sense. So, yeah, she like helps him to his feet and just like, I have somebody that I want you to meet. I love this line. I used to think the life strands of my friends frayed around me because mine was too strong. Now I realize that when we are wound together, we make something unbreakable, something that lasts long after this life ends. My friends have filled the hollow carved in me by my wife's death. They've made me whole again. My mother joins them now on the ramp, walking with Kieran to set foot on Earth for the first time. She smiles like I did when she smells the salt. The wind kicks her gray hair. Her eyes are glassy and full of the joy my father always wanted for her, and in her arms she carries a laughing child with golden hair. Mustang? I ask, my voice trembling. Who is that? Darrow? Mustang smiles over at me. That is our son. His name is Pax. I love that he's named Pax. I wasn't expecting it, but I do really love it. Delightful. And the epilogue, we get the explanation of how this happened and that she gave the kid to Kavex's wife, the best possible ally, like, trusting them to raise your kid if something happens to you, like, very good call. That peace she intended to make with the sovereign was not just for her and her people, but for her son. She wanted a world without war for him. I can't hate her for that, for keeping this secret from me. And she says that she and his mother talked about whether or not to tell him earlier, and his mother said not to, because if he was aware that he had something that he could lose, he wouldn't be able to do the things that needed doing. And also, there was the concern that somebody would find out and then they would use this kid against him, which absolutely either they would, or they would pretend they had found him, or they would, there's just so many directions that could be used in, even if they didn't actually get a hold of his kid. And I fully agree. Just keep him from even knowing about it. We don't need to add that factor into things. So, yeah, the sacrifices we made to take Luna will haunt our new world. I know that. But I am no longer alone in the dark. I can be a builder, not just a destroyer. Eo and Fitchner saw that when I could not. They believed in me. So whether they wait for me in the Vale or not, I feel them in my heart. I hear their echo beating across the worlds. I see them in my son, and when he is old enough, I will take him on my knee, and his mother and I will tell him of the rage of Ares, the strength of Ragnar, the honor of Cassius, the love of Severo, the loyalty of Victra, and the dream of Io, the girl who inspired me to live for more. So, yeah, I really like this ending. I think that it's a nice sort of like shifting into the next phase of things, and just the fact that like something new had already started before he realized it had, and that was like Mustang looking at him all the time and sort of trying to consider the situation and whether or not I was also wondering, because it seemed like she was also testing him all the time, but I also understood why after everything she would feel a little bit uncertain about him. So I wasn't taking that as like an indictment of his personality or anything. She's seen him be able to do some pretty brutal stuff. And yeah, you know, so personally, I was not like even trying to read into that any further, but knowing now that she was thinking ahead the way that she was because of her own child, I think she would have anyway, because that's the kind of person she is. But I do think that, like, that just, of course, is going to add a whole other dimension to the issue. That makes a lot of sense. I think it's satisfying. And at the same time, I definitely could see if, due to the way that women have been treated in the series overall, I could understand if you're not really happy with this ending. Because her being made sovereign is fantastic, but also the fact that it's like she only cared about what was going to happen because of her children. I think that's an oversimplification, but I can see how it would feel like, I don't even want to say like diminishing exactly, because I think that's really unfair and problematic in its own way. But just adding that dimension to things for her might seem a little obvious. But you know what? Maybe that's the point. Like, maybe that's fine. It's meant to point out how really we all want the same things. We all want the peace for our children. We are all after the, like, can't we all just get along, basically? And no matter who you are, it really comes down to that, whether they're your children or not. Maybe that's like just supposed to be the main takeaway as it is. And I'm okay with that. So, all right, my friends, I have to wrap this one up, but can't believe that's the end of that series. That is wild. I am really happy with it, though. I really am. And I feel like, I have an instinctive sort of knee jerk of like, no, please, to the idea of this kid's POV being the one for the next book. But I've realized I'm okay with it. It's just that I find dealing with children in fiction can be really boring, but I need to trust this author and also trust the fact that the kid will be aged up enough to be interesting, and that will be fine. So bring it on. I won't check ahead. I'm just going to open the book and see what it says. All right, everybody. Thank you again for listening, for going on the journey with me. Appreciate you all. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.